Well, let me thank you for being here this morning. First of all, it's spring break. Secondly, I know when that marquee does not list the name of either Marlon or Barbara, the temptation to stay home is great, so thank you. And to be sure that your coming out was worth your while this morning, I want to begin with what I believe is the finest Unitarian joke you'll ever hear. The Roman Catholic Cardinal of Boston had been having ecumenical conversations with different religious groups. He'd been with Lutherans, Episcopalians, even Pentecostals, and it occurred to him he'd never reached out to Unitarians, who are in fact headquartered in his city of Boston. So he reached out, made arrangements, they had meetings which were to conclude with a large ecumenical service. On the day of the service, the opening hymn was playing and the clergy all processed up to the front. When they got to the chancel, it became clear that there weren't enough chairs up there. They were short, 3 chairs, and it meant that the 3 Unitarian representatives would be embarrassingly standing. The Cardinal was extremely uncomfortable, didn't know what to do, and when he spotted in the front pew an older gentleman who was always at the cathedral. He came every day for Mass, and he attended all of these special services. So he was sitting in the front pew, and the Cardinal called him up to the chancel. The man had hearing aids, so he whispered into his ear, "The Unitarians are standing, get 3 chairs." The man paused, looked confused, so the Cardinal repeated himself. "The Unitarians are standing, get 3 chairs." The man nodded his head, sat back down. When the hymn ended, everyone was seated except the Unitarians. And to the Cardinal's shock, the older man walked up to the lectern, tapped on the mic to make sure it was on, and then in a very, very nervous voice, he said, "This strikes me as somewhat irregular, but the Cardinal would like us all to stand and give the Unitarians 3 cheers." Believe it or not, that a little bit of humor does tie into my talk, because obviously the Cardinal had a problem that was embarrassing him. And what I want to talk to you about this morning are problems. Specifically, what would the Buddha say to you, to us, about our problems? Now, I'm assuming that in any congregation of any size, there are people who have a problem at any given time, and some of those problems are pretty serious and complicated. And so maybe there's somebody here this morning and you've had medical tests and they didn't come back the way you had hoped. Maybe you've been working faithfully for a company and suddenly you're out of a job. Maybe someone you've depended on has just walked out of your life. And to our virtual congregation, I would say maybe someone you have loved deeply has died and you're really hurting. So to those real-life human problems, what would the Buddha say? Well, let me tell you what happened 2,600 years ago. The Buddha gave a talk, and afterwards, he was an excellent teacher. He did a question and answer. And a gentleman stood up and explained to the Buddha that he was having a variety of problems in his life, and he listed them, a long litany, and then paused, hoping the Buddha could resolve it. The Buddha looked at him and he said, "Well, look, there is absolutely nothing in my teachings that can prevent you from having a problem. However, what my teachings can offer you is this," and here's what he said then, and here's what he would say now, 2,600 years later, to us. "Problems are inevitable, but you are capable." He would say that all of you have within you all the power you need to be healthy, happy, whole, and wise. And what I'd like to do this morning is simply go over 4 powers for dealing with problems that all of us have. And I'm going to be just that basic. It'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, and you'll be out of here. So sit tight. The first power to tap into when you're dealing with a problem especially if the problem is large, is the power of superior understanding. The word superior comes from the Old French, and before that Latin, and it means higher. If you look superior up in the dictionary, it means more comprehensive, not yielding to circumstances, extraordinary awareness. When we have a problem, especially a big one, that's frightening and frustrating and threatening, we need to tap into the power of superior understanding. And here's why. Life seems to test and retest us for emotional maturity, and whether we pass or fail those tests is entirely up to us. The power of superior understanding. Here's an example. I read about a woman recently in her 30s, so young. She was feeling off. Not sick, but not exactly healthy. And so she went in for tests. Everything they did, nothing came up, so the tests went deeper, more extensive, more obscure, and finally it was determined that she had very unusual life-threatening illness, which they said was advanced. The physician told her that there is no turning back from it and there's no treatment for it, that she would become quite sick, and that life expectancy on that condition was very limited. Now, you can only imagine what it would feel like to have that kind of information. And immediately she slipped into self-pity and some anger and depression, perfectly understandable. However, it wasn't long before something else kicked in for her. Superior understanding. She had seen recently on television the Dalai Lama, and she asked herself a question which eventually completely transformed her. Here's the question she asked. If the Dalai Lama were in my shoes, how would he feel and how would he handle the situation? So she pondered that question for several hours, and she finally concluded that the Dalai Lama, known for his kindness, would simply continue to be a kind human. And so in her head, she switched mantras from "I'm really sick" to "I'm going to be kind." And after that, she continued going for medical tests and exams, was in and out of hospitals and clinics and doctors' offices, and everyone she encountered, nurses, therapists, technicians, family, friends, she was incredibly kind, kinder than she really needed to be. Here's the crazy thing. After they did more tests, it was discovered that what she had received was a false positive. While she was greatly relieved at the new assessment, she realized that working with her mind that way was a powerful awareness, and that she would never be the same after that. Now, think about her circumstance and apply it to yourself. If you've got a problem that is really discouraging you, depressing you, despairing you, can you not ask the same question she did? If the Dalai Lama were in my shoes, how would he feel? How would he handle the situation? And it doesn't have to be the Dalai Lama. Just pick anyone who inspires you. If Mother Teresa were in my shoes, how would she feel? How would she handle the situation? Or Martin Luther King Jr. or Thich Nhat Hanh, Oprah Winfrey. If she were in my shoes, how would she feel? How would she handle the situation? Or you can even bring it closer to home. If Barbara Prose were in my shoes, how would she feel? How would she handle the situation? So the first power we have to tap into is the power of superior understanding. Second one is the power of a positive attitude. Now, you know, every time I say this, and I do workshops and talk about this in meditation, when I talk about positive thinking and positive attitude, I always see a sneer or two out there like it's too simplistic and can't work. But my training, my background in Christian theology, in yoga and Buddhism, Vedic philosophy, I know it works. And I also know how easily we become conditioned to embrace the negative, the pessimistic, the cynical, leaving very little room for the positive. It's a funny story. told about two men, which illustrates how the negative can really get into your system. These two men were really good friends. One was very positive. The other one was really, really negative. And his name was Norm. And after a while, the positive friend began thinking of his friend as negative Norm, because he never saw the positive in anything. Everything was always no and negative. The positive friend had sometime earlier adopted a small dog. And one of the things he noticed about his dog is it had a huge paw, even as a puppy. And then as the dog became full grown, that paw got larger and larger and larger. But not only that, in between the toes, there was a web going from toenail to toenail on each of the four paws. And here's what happened. When they would walk around the pond, and he would throw a stick into the water, play fetch, the dog, instead of swimming in the water, because of those massive paws, walked on the water like it was a rink. Picked up the stick and brought it back. The first time he saw it, he realized, oh, wow, I've got to show this to negative Norm. He will at least have to say something positive about my dog, and maybe that will jumpstart the process for him. So he invited negative Norm to go for a walk around the pond, and casually he picked up a stick, threw it out into the pond. The dog walked on the water, picked up the stick, came back. Norm didn't say anything. Second time, dog walked out on the water, came back. Norm didn't say anything. After the third time, the positive man said to Norm, Norm, don't you notice anything unusual about my dog? Norm replied, yes, but I didn't want to say anything because you're always telling me I'm so negative. It's clear to me your dog can't swim. See, that's what happens when you only see the negative constantly. You just squeezes out any opportunity for optimism. So try this. The next time a problem comes your way, or if you're facing one now, instead of leaning toward the negative and predicting a disaster or that it's all over, switch and lean toward the optimistic and the positive, and then maybe doors will open to you that you didn't know could. A couple of weeks ago, I was shopping in what we would call a big box retail store, you know, huge, concrete floor, high shelving. There was a man in there scrubbing the floors with a large machine. And that store is always quite immaculate. So as I walked by the man scrubbing the floor, I paused and I looked at him and I said, I want to thank you for keeping this store so clean. It's really always very immaculate. The man turned off the machine and looked at me as though he'd never received a compliment before, and I wasn't sure what would come. But you know what he said to me? He said, this store is clean because I have OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. And I thought, well, now this is going to be an interesting conversation. I responded and I said, well, with your personality, you are perfect for this kind of vocation. And the man, the janitor, told me that he had had problems finding and keeping employment because employers couldn't work with his OCD, or he couldn't work with him because of his OCD. And finally, after losing tons of jobs, he sat himself down and he said to himself, okay, his name is Michael. Michael, where is the best place for someone with OCD to work? What can I do for employment to make the best use of my condition? And he concluded that the best use of his life and personality would be to enter the custodial profession. So he secured a job with a large custodial firm, and not surprisingly, he became one of their best employees. And it's his firm that had a contract with these big box retail stores in Tulsa. There are 6 of them. And he was assigned to one of them. After he'd been there just a little while, the OCD kicked in. He noticed that the custodial service was taking shortcuts on the cleaning, and he didn't like that. He didn't want to quit his job, so he did a very gutsy thing. He told me that very, very respectfully, he approached the manager of the big box store, and he said to him, you know, I can keep your store cleaner and cheaper than what you're paying the custodial service. And of course, these managers always want to save money. They took him on a 30-day trial, and it worked. Now he not only cleans that one store, but he is director of custodial services for all 6 of the big box retail stores in Tulsa. Now, just think about that for a moment. He had OCD. What if you're here and you've been given one of those psychiatric labels, or you have a family member, Asperger's, bipolar, ADD, dyslexic? You know, it doesn't have to be all negative, especially if you learn to work with it to your advantage. And so that's the second power, the power of a positive attitude. The third power is the power of a strong will. And here all I want to do is share with you 2 quotes that I find very helpful. First one is from a young woman named Veronica Roth. You may not know the name. She's an American novelist. She's the author of the best-selling science fiction series called Divergent. And in the third one, it's entitled Allegiant, she offers this powerful insight to anyone dealing with a problem. Now just listen to her. There are so many ways to be brave in this world. Sometimes bravery involves laying down your life. Sometimes it involves giving up everything you have ever known or everyone you have ever loved. But sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's nothing more than gritting your teeth through the pain and the work of every day to make the slow, slow walk toward a better life. That is the sort of bravery I must have now. Second quote's from Stephen Hawking. He died just this week, the theoretical physicist. You know, he had ALS, and in spite of creeping paralysis, which all over his body, he continued working and being of benefit. Here's what he said. However difficult life may seem, there is always something you can do and succeed at. It matters that you just don't give up. So as you deal with your issue, remind yourself of Roth's wisdom that during a time when life is challenging, you must simply grit your teeth through the pain and work every day the slow walk toward a better life. And Stephen Hawking, however difficult life may seem, there's always something you can do. It matters just that you don't give up. Fourth power, and the last one, is the power of joy. Now, here's the problem with problems. They suck the life out of us. And we have to find ways for it not to do that entirely. It just seems to me that we can be upset, frustrated, angry, depressed, despairing, and there can be points of joy. It doesn't have to be one or the other. And in order to maintain light in our lives, we need to find those points of joy. Buddhist writer Tulku Thondup says, "A spark of peace and joy can be found in every situation if we care to find it and apply it." He says, even if you're having a hellish life, there will always be some moments of peace and joy that we could use as a source of healing for ourselves and for others. Some time ago, I read a book titled The 10 Things to Do When Your Life Falls Apart. It's by Daphne Rose Kingma. In it, she has a personal chapter about her father who was hospitalized, and it was clear to the family that he was entering the last days of his life. One morning, a few days before his death, when his doctor came in to check on him, her father struggled to raise himself up out of the bed. He wanted to talk to the doctor, and it was quite an effort. When he finally found his voice, here's what he said. "Doctor, since you told me a couple of days ago that in a few more days I'll be in a coma, I want to take this opportunity to thank you for everything you've done for me during these final days of my life." Surprised by those words, the doctor, a guy, he began to weep, and he was doing his best to hold the tears back, but it wasn't happening. Kingma's father continued to speak, thanking him for having chosen to be a doctor, for having had the courage to treat people like him with a terminal illness, for being so straightforward in communicating to him and his family about the path of his illness, and for his kind and consistent presence. After the funeral, Daphne Kingma ran into the doctor, who told her that her father had a tremendous impact on his life. He said, you know, I studied over a dozen years to become a physician, and he says, I did this so I could save people. And he said, instead, the particular residency I did, most of my patients die. And he told Daphne he was ready to quit that line of medicine and go into something administrative. And it was her father's words which brought new energy and passion into his professional and personal life. We all have 4 powers for dealing with problems: the power of superior understanding, power of a positive attitude, power of a strong will, power of joy. The Buddha said, problems are inevitable, but you are capable. You have within you all the power you need to be happy, healthy, whole, wise. Use them. Keep getting up, keep showing up. It's just that simple. Thank you.
You're visiting with us online today. We love connecting with people all across the country and around the world, sharing our powerful message of love beyond belief.
There's something new happening here. You can now join All Souls as a virtual member. Our virtual membership is designed for friends who live outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and who want to engage with All Souls in a meaningful way.
You can be part of an expanding family, a global family really, wherever you are. If you live in Oklahoma,
Ohio,
or Orange County, California,
Canada,
or Cameroon. By becoming a virtual member, you'll be able to deepen your connections with members and friends here in Tulsa and with members wherever you are.
Each week, you'll receive special All Souls content tailored for you, our virtual members. Virtual members have access to pastoral care, to personal prayers, and also receive invitations to exclusive web events.
You can learn more, and if you're ready, you can become a virtual member today by visiting allsoulschurch.org/virtual membership.
We're grateful our ministries are having a positive impact on your life, and we want to share the good news of love beyond belief with more and more people. So no matter what, we need your support to keep this ministry growing and thriving, so please consider making a gift today. You can do so by texting
LOVEBB for Love Beyond Belief to 73256, or simply visit our website. You are a blessing in our lives. May you be blessed
and be a blessing.